It was a chilly Friday afternoon when I first saw them. The scene that unfolded before me was something I couldn't have envisioned, even in my most surreal dreams. The woman I had been married to for over 2 decades, the one who had vowed to remain by my side forever, entered our home with a man who wasn't me. "Peter. What are you doing home?" Her voice, high-pitched and strained, betrayed her shock at finding me seated at the kitchen table when I should have been at work. Allison, my wife of 22 years, stood frozen in the doorway, her body partially concealed by the tall, lean man behind her. He was clad in an impeccable suit, the sort only someone deeply entrenched in the corporate world could afford. The two of them glided through the doorway with an ease that felt unnervingly rehearsed, as though this moment had played out countless times in their minds before becoming reality. Allison still looked as stunning as ever, yet something fundamental had changed. The woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had vowed to cherish with all my heart, was no longer the person standing before me. Her once soft eyes now carried a guarded edge, the warmth that used to light up her face conspicuously absent. Her auburn hair, which she once styled meticulously to frame her features, hung in disheveled strands that no longer seemed to suit her. And then there was her blouse, white, sheer, and with an extra button undone at the top. It offered just enough of a glimpse to draw attention, a choice that seemed anything but accidental. "Who's this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even as my chest thudded with the intensity of suppressed anger. The man behind her hesitated, unsure of how to respond, until Allison stepped aside to let him approach. Extending his hand, he introduced himself with a polite yet detached confidence. "Hi, Mr. Daniels. I'm Greg Martin. I've been working with Allison on a new project at the firm." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I sat there, staring at him, then at both of them. A realization crept over me, I was completely powerless in that moment. For an instant, I contemplated hurling the glass of water in my hand at his perfectly smug face. My fists tightened of their own accord, my blood boiling with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. "I know exactly who you are," I said, standing up at last. My voice was calm, but a storm of anger brewed just beneath the surface. "You're the man who's been spending time with my wife." Allison flinched. Her composed exterior cracked for a moment, and she appeared uncertain, at a loss for words. Greg, sensing the rising tension, stepped back slightly, unsure whether to confront me or retreat. His indecision only fueled my frustration. "You're the one helping her with those new projects, huh?" I continued, my voice laced with biting sarcasm. "Tell me, Greg, do these projects always require this level of intimacy?" Allison's face hardened. "Peter, we didn't come here to fight. We came to talk," she said quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Talk?" I shot back, my hands trembling with barely contained rage. "Talk about what, Allison? About this man walking into our home like he belongs here? Or about the fact that you've been lying to me for months?" Her composure wavered. For the first time, I saw guilt flicker in her eyes, a guilt she tried to mask with a weak, unconvincing smile. But her facade crumbled entirely when I asked the question that had been haunting me for weeks. "Why wasn't I good enough for you anymore, Allison?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. She couldn't meet my eyes, and that was all the confirmation I needed. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had already checked out of our marriage. I was no longer the man she returned to each night, I had become a placeholder in her life. Then, with a trembling voice, she dropped the bombshell, "I want a divorce, Peter." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. "You've got to be kidding me," I replied, my mind racing to make sense of what I was hearing. "After everything we've been through, you're going to throw it all away? For what, some project? For him?" Greg shifted uncomfortably, as though he were a guest at a party that had gone terribly wrong. He glanced at Allison, seemingly seeking her permission to speak, but she silenced him with a simple gesture. "We've been through so much, Peter," she said, her voice softer now. But this is different. It's not something that can be fixed. I felt my heart plummet into my stomach. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to destroy something, anything. But instead, I stood frozen, trying to absorb her words. "You're right about one thing," I said at last, my voice low and measured. "This isn't something that can be fixed. Because you've already made your choice." And then, to my utter disbelief, she turned to Greg. "Greg and I are going away for the weekend," she said, her tone carrying an air of finality. "We're going to the city to figure things out." Her words hung in the air, cutting deeper than I thought possible. Allison spoke again, trying to explain herself, but her reasoning only made the betrayal feel sharper. "Peter, I need this. I need space to breathe and think. Our life together, it's become a series of routines. We talk, but we don't communicate. We exist together, but we're not really living. I feel lost, and I need to find myself again." Her eyes finally met mine, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I don't know what I'll decide, but I can't keep living like this. I hope you can understand that this isn't about you not being good enough, it's about me needing to figure out who I am." Her words echoed in my mind long after she had finished. As she turned to leave, Greg followed close behind, and I stood there, grappling with the shattering realization that the life I had built was crumbling before my eyes. She exhaled deeply, her breath shaky, as if trying to steady the storm within her. Her decision was resolute, but her heart was torn, as she moved closer to the door. Their shared life hung precariously in the balance, teetering on the edge of collapse. "I'm leaving, Peter," she said again, her voice steadier this time. The words felt like a freight train had barreled through me, leaving destruction in its wake. The shock and disbelief were insurmountable, impossible to process in one fleeting moment. Yet, there it was, her decision, final and unyielding, lingering in the air like a heavy fog. The woman I had dedicated my life to, the woman who had been my partner in everything, had already chosen a different road. That road led straight to the arms of another man. Without uttering another word, Allison stepped toward the door, her movements deliberate yet filled with unspoken tension. Greg followed closely behind, sparing me a single glance over his shoulder. His expression was a strange mix of unease and smugness, as though he was both ashamed and triumphant in equal measure. I wanted to act, to yell, to smash something, to unleash the torrent of fury that churned within me. But instead, I stood motionless, rooted to the spot as they disappeared from view. The door clicked softly shut behind them, and with that sound, the silence of the house swallowed me whole. It was a silence so profound that it seemed to amplify the chaos raging inside me. I sank back into my chair, the weight of what had just transpired settling on my shoulders. This wasn't merely the end of a marriage, it was the unraveling of everything I had built my life around. The foundation was crumbling, and I was powerless to stop it. I drew a shaky breath, trying to steady myself as my thoughts began to align with cold, methodical precision. The next steps became clear in my mind. Divorce lawyers. A life forever altered. But what about Greg? The man who had so brazenly stepped into my home and dismantled my world. I couldn't let him walk away unscathed, not this time. The echoes of their betrayal reverberated in every corner of the room, each one cutting deeper than the last. Yet, beneath the pain, a plan began to take shape. Rising from my chair, I felt a newfound resolve harden within me. The first order of business was evidence, concrete, undeniable proof of their affair. Allison's carelessness with her digital trail proved to be her undoing. In her hurried departure, she had left her laptop open. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Emails, messages, and receipts for a necklace I had never seen but now recognized in photos of her with Greg. Each discovery was a knife to my chest, but it also strengthened my determination. Within an hour, I had compiled everything, copied, saved, and secured. I contacted a private investigator to ensure no detail was overlooked. By the time the weekend arrived, I knew exactly where they would be, a luxury hotel in the city, one that held memories of happier times for us. The irony was bitter, but it fueled my drive. When Monday morning came, I wasted no time. My first stop was my lawyer's office, where I laid out the evidence and instructed him to proceed with the divorce. "We'll file today," he assured me, his tone cold and clinical. "She'll be served by the end of the day." But I wasn't done. Greg needed to understand the gravity of what he had done. Armed with the address of his office, I arrived unannounced. The receptionist hesitated but eventually directed me to his door. Greg looked up, startled, as I entered and shut the door behind me. His attempt at a polite greeting was cut short by the icy resolve in my voice. "You've made a colossal mistake," I said, my tone measured and unrelenting. "And I'm here to make sure you understand just how big." Greg's composure wavered. "Peter, I think we can work this out," he stammered, rising from his chair. "There's nothing to work out," I shot back. "You'll resign today. Your superiors have already been informed of your conduct, with evidence to back it up. Consider this your last day in the city." My words were final, leaving no room for negotiation. Greg sank back into his chair, the fight draining from him as he realized the full weight of the situation. With Greg's career effectively dismantled, I turned my attention back to Allison. The divorce papers were served at her office, a public spectacle that left no doubt about the consequences of her actions. She tried calling me, sending messages filled with apologies and explanations, but I ignored them all. Her voice, once a source of comfort, was now a reminder of her lies. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, the evidence I had gathered left her with little leverage. The prenuptial agreement we had signed long ago became her undoing, ensuring that she walked away with almost nothing. It was harsh, perhaps, but no harsher than the betrayal she had inflicted upon me. The final act of my revenge was a symbolic one. Among the many treasures we had collected during our marriage, there was a painting she adored, a Caravaggio replica that had always held a special place in her heart. On the day she came to collect her belongings, I made sure it was prominently displayed. "You're taking the Caravaggio?" she asked, a flicker of hope in her voice. "It's just a painting," I replied coldly. "You've lost far more than that." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. The woman standing before me was a stranger, her presence a ghost of the life we once shared. As she left, her whispered plea lingered in the air, "I hope one day you can forgive me." I turned away, my heart a fortress she could no longer breach. "It's too late for that," I said, sealing the final chapter of our story. In the silence of the empty house, I pondered the cost of my actions. Had I gone too far? Perhaps. But in the game of betrayal, you either become the victim or the victor. And I had chosen the latter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I sat alone. The house was silent, the echoes of the past finally laid to rest. I had won, but the victory was hollow, and I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it.